Greetings, Princeps. Welcome to the 61st episode of the God Engine Cast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the Adeptus Titanicus wargame produced by Games Workshop. In this week's show, we're going to be discussing the recent articles on the Warhammer Community website, looking at the previews of the rules and models they've provided, and my thoughts about them. Before we get too far with today's show, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who contributes to this show through Patreon and Ko-Fi. The support I get from these sites is incredible. It has let me do a fair few things this year. If you're interested in helping support the show, please see the links in the show notes for both my Patreon and Ko-Fi account. If you do not have the funds to do either, which I fully understand, please just rate and review the show and spread the word of the show. More people talking about the show means more people listening, and that has a wonderful effect on helping the podcast in a great many ways. Well, I've said that a lot over previous shows, so let's just move on. Yeah, good idea. Following the release of the Warmaster kit and the Loyalist book, Games Workshop has been pretty quiet on what they plan to release for Titanicus. This all changed on the 16th of August this year with the preview of the Warmaster Iconoclast Titan. A small Warhammer Community article dropped that showed a couple of preview pictures of the Titan, plus a rather fun little YouTube video which talks about how to survive being attacked by one, though it definitely has much more of a 40k theme than the standard Horus Heresy themes of the Titanicus world. But what do we know about this new Warmaster Titan? Well, basically, at this point, we know that it has two unique weapons from the Warmaster's standard Plasma Annihilator. The first is the Desolator Chainsword, which is a giant chainsword, about as big as the plasma weapons on the standard Warmaster. And in the other arm, it has a claw device that is referred to as the Kratos Siege Drill, but also can be changed up to have the Grav Imploder. They look virtually identical. It looks like the center of the sort of hand claw switches out for the difference between the Siege Drill and the Grav Imploder. Yeah, it looks pretty fun. Additionally, the Carapace weapon that was the Relevator missile launcher on the standard Warmaster has been replaced by some sort of macro cannon style weapon that looks pretty cool. But at the moment, that is all we know about this particular Titan. There has not been any previews of the rules or indications of how it will work on the battlefield. There are a lot of assumptions that can be made, and a lot of things that can be inferred. Based on the name of the Titan, and some artwork that was previewed in the latest Warhammer Community article about the Loyalist Legionnaires book, which we'll discuss in a moment, I'm becoming fairly confident to say this is going to be a separate class of Titan to the standard Warmaster. I suspect this means it's going to have a slightly different profile. Now, whether the weapons that the Ironclast is armed with are interchangeable with other Warmaster styles, as in, can the standard Warmaster take the claw or the chainsword, and can the Iconoclast theoretically take one of the plasma cannons, they are going to be some very interesting questions. But there is a clear distinction in the naming of the two Titan types that really makes me think they are going to have some unique special rules. Which wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't at all surprise me to try and balance some of these close combat weapons that the Iconoclast is armed with. They'll have some sort of rule to give them a little bit more mobility to allow them to get into close combat a little easier. But this is all rampant speculation, and I'm probably very, very wrong, and I'm looking forward to finding out what the answer is. But let's turn to sort of the part you probably all are interested in, which are my opinions about the Titan. Well, I'm very mixed on it. I think you can tell the fact that I've waited over a month to even talk about this Titan, that it's not something I'm, enthused about. I'm not sure the game needed another Warmaster-style Titan. I've enjoyed seeing the Warmasters on the table. I'm enjoying painting my current Warmaster. But I'm probably not going to buy the new one. If I can get the sprue separately, I'll probably buy it. And truth be told, if I can't buy it, I may look at picking one of the weapons up from something like Battle Blink, who I'm sure will make a variant weapon. just so I've got something I can swap out with if my standard Warmaster is allowed to do that. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm not sure what the thought process is at Games Workshop about it. It feels like a model they were able to put out quickly and easily, so they have. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it affects the game as a whole. I've seen the Warmaster now on the table a fair few times. I played against it twice now, and at the Iron Halo, as we will discuss here in a bit, we actually had a player bring the Warmaster for a great deal of their games. And it was okay. It wasn't unbalanced, wasn't overpowered. People struggled to take it down, but it also struggled to do a huge amount of damage to the opponents. Without some really careful use of split fire and knowledge about what you're doing to a precise nth degree, you're kind of limited by it, and a good opponent will be able to maneuver around the Warmaster to really limit its power. And that problem is going to be exponentially increased by switching out the weapons to short-range close combat attacks. Admittingly, you won't have the trouble with stripping shields, because you won't have to worry about that. And a good traitor player with using the right traits and stratagems will be able to make a pretty convincing charge to take out a single warlord or even enemy Warmaster with it, presumably. But against someone running something like a Legio Audax list, where there's just a lot of targets, the Warmaster are still going to be overwhelmed, and even more so with the limited weapons, where the enemy probably can keep out of your way. I think the Corsair Maniple, much to Maximal Fire Ben's joy, will find even more use with fighting this sort of monster, able to just keep out of the way while focusing their guns on it. So there's that. So yeah, overall, I love the model. I love the idea of it. I'm not particularly happy about the thoughts of painting another one. I'm not sure I'm going to buy another one, and I'm not sure about how it's going to affect the game as a whole. As I said when the Warmaster dropped, I'd much, much rather see a lighter Titan, something that fits between the Warhound and Reaver. I really feel that's what the game needs, is that little bit more versatility in those lighter weight classes. But I will see, and I will gladly see it on the battlefield. And yeah, any content is good content. But before we completely move away from that article on the 16th, I want to take a moment to talk about the paint scheme of the Warmaster Titan they presented. I was really critical about that initial paint scheme they showed with the Legio Mortis colour palette. I don't think it really worked very well with the original release of the Warmaster in January. But yeah, this Gryphonicus Warmaster they presented for the Iconoclast is really nice. Now, I will also note there is a bit of an irony here that the Titan that was released with the Loyalist book was shown in Traitor colours, and the Titan that's presented with the Traitor book is shown in Loyalist colours. But anyway, I think they really painted this Warmaster up to a much cleaner paint scheme. The greys and the yellows counterbalance each other really well. The paneling sort of doesn't jar, and it looks much more of a cohesive. It looks much more complete, and even the little flourishes like the earring banners and the like don't look as weird as they did on that initial Titan. Now, it may be that I've got used to looking at the Warmaster, now I'm actually painting one of myself. But yeah, I actually much prefer the look of this model they showed on the preview than the one they presented back at the start of the year. Yeah. Though I will say again, I do wish they put this model on a larger base. I know it would cause all sorts of trouble with turn templates and arcs and the like, but a slightly larger base would make the model look so much more dynamic. It's so all Warmasters are so squeezed onto the base that it's just problematic. And I know several of my friends and several people online have sort of built the base up and out to give you a bit more room for posing. But yeah, another round of doing that for another model, it feels like another miss. Ah well. So a few weeks ago, on the 21st of September, the next Warhammer Community article dropped talking about new Titanicus content, namely being a preview of some paint jobs of the Warmaster Titans painted by members of the studio. These models look incredible. There are some really fun posing, going back to the base issue I just raised, some fantastic weathering, and some beautiful versions of this model. Really like the James Karch Gryphonicus with the incredible weathering and the zero glow off the plasma. The plasma's done in this copper. It looks really wonderful, really well weathered. And it's standing on top of a downed Reaver by the looks of things, and it's just really well done. I don't know. It felt like I really wanted to see more out of this article. I was really hoping we'd see a bit more of the Warmaster Iconoclast, but it's kind of fun to see these really hyper detailed paint jobs that some people put a lot of time and energy into. I know there are some other great ones around the internet, but it's just really nice to see what's being done at Games Workshop Prime, and just seeing the quality of these models and the number of these models kind of helps me, or gives me hope that Titanicus is still a game a lot of people play actually in Nottingham itself. I've said this before on this podcast, and just from the way the Warhammer Community website and team talk about Titanicus, I think it's really one of the favoured games up there. I wouldn't be surprised that the smaller game length means that it's played often at the end of the day. I know and over lunch hours, I know there's a big push for the Games Workshop employees in Nottingham to have time to play some games. And it really does feel that Titanicus is a common game to play up there. It gives me hope that Titanicus is going to maintain its level of support, popularity in front of some of the other great successes they've had recently. I do want to take a moment to talk about the Legio Praegus colour scheme put out by Owen Patton. It's a really fun colour scheme, really simple. Turns what could have been a pretty complicated scheme that a lot of folk have struggled with, or have heard people struggling with, and putting it out in a standard Games Workshop colour scheme. I had one of my friends who collects the Legio going, "Hey, Games Workshop have put out an official colour palette." I'm not quite sure you'd consider it fully official, as it's from the Games Workshop community side, and they have a habit of occasionally missing the mark. But yeah, I think it's a really nice and simple colour scheme, and the model looks really approachable and an easy way to make something table ready. And yeah, overall, a really fun article, and very glad they put it out. It's just really nice to see a nice hobby piece about this fantastic game. So then we move to the latest Warhammer Community article on Titanicus, which is the preview of the Traitor Legions book. This book has been eagerly awaited since the release of the Loyalist book, especially given the fact much of the context within was pretty heavily hinted at throughout the Loyalist book. So the Warhammer Community article states that we're going to get 16 Titan Legions, 12 households, and 19 maniples, which I believe will match the Loyalist book exactly. It is unclear if the 16 legions within this book includes the Black Shield legions we've had referenced, or if we're going to be getting some new legios as well. I kind of suspect it's going to include the Black Shields, and the Black Shields at this point are going to be rolled within the Traitor book. It would be seen to be the path of least resistance for Games Workshop, but I wait to be surprised. The listing of 19 maniples means we're going to get all the 18 from the core Loyalist book and the other books, plus the specialist maniple for Legio Audax. Unsurprisingly, the Warhammer Community article talks about how the Traitor book is going to include rules for the Iconoclast. It'll be interesting to see what rules are actually within the Traitor Legio book for the Warmaster Iconoclast, rather than just referencing it exists, like the Loyalist book referenced the Warmaster, in the sense that it just shows where you can use it in army construction. But I think the big news for the new Traitor book is the Corrupted Titans. We'd all hoped, I think, that the Corrupted Titan rules would be within the Traitor book, especially as it was so explicitly mentioned within the Loyalist Legio's book in the spring. So the Warhammer Community article shows us a couple of examples of Corrupted Titans and how they actually work. And the system seems fairly simple. It appears that any Titan can be unlocked as a Corrupted Titan by taking a base mutation upgrade. This unlocks a single ability for the Titan, plus specialist trait tables for the Machine Spirit and Personal Trait. Finally, then, there are additional mutations that you can apply to a Titan for an additional cost, giving it even more, obviously, additional special rules. The article itself previews 4 of these rules, which I think we're just going to discuss in a bit more length now, and see if I can deduce what I think other such upgrades are going to be. So, good amount of speculation here, so yeah, let's get to it. So let's start at the top with the base mutation example they give. It's called Warp Conduit. It's going to cost 20 points. And the unit that gains the ability, as well as becoming a corrupted titan, gains the ability to once per game target an enemy within their front arc and line of sight, and give them a strength 10 hit that bypasses voids and shields, and you get to pick a location of your choice. This, for just 20 points alone, even without any of the additional bonuses you're going to get from being a corrupted titan, is really good. It's 10 points more than a vortex missile, but you don't need to roll to hit. You're generally, on most titans, going to cause more damage than a vortex missile. I think this pairs really well with a vortex missile. You could fire a vortex missile, target, say, someone's body, manage to land a critical or two to them, and then follow it up with a strength 10 hit to that location, which has already taken a little bit of extra damage, so suddenly you're looking at a strength 12 hit. That's very likely to cause another critical, if you're really lucky and call them out, maybe 2. And very easily 1-2 punch something out of the game before, you fire the rest of your weapons. It's rather fun and very flexible. And alone, I think it's pointed right that it is a competitive upgrade with things like tracking gyroscopes. And that worries me, because just looking at the ability to take a strength 10 hit for 20 points, I do start worrying what the other upgrade options are going to be, and what the effect of being a corrupted titan is on the game. There's a lot of unknowns there. Obviously, the Loyalists come with some toys that you can use to fight against people with corrupted titans, so you have to take that into the account as far as its usefulness on the battlefield. But 20 points for a strength 10 hit plus additional stuff sounds really good, to be honest. And I'm not going to panic. This is not me being like, oh god, corrupted titans are going to break the game. But I do think they stand a chance of being very, very powerful, which is probably for the best. But I think a lot of it will depend on what the additional traits corrupted titans get. Now, we know they're going to get specialized awakened machine spirit and personal tables, which they say is going to add extra flavor, but they do add extra rules. So let's take a look at the 2 examples for those we've got, and then sit back down and draw some conclusions before we move on to the additional stuff. The first set of additional rules that the Warhammer Community article covers is the Awakened Entity Table. The Awakened Entity Table replaces the Machine Spirit table for a Titan. Obviously, binding a demon to a Titan removes the Machine Spirit and gives it something a lot more sinister to be the entity the Princep's fighting against. Presumably, the mechanics for arousing the demon are very similar to that of awakening the Machine Spirit. I rather hope there's some sort of penalty to make it more likely that the demon takes over, as one imagines the demon may be a little bit more powerful than your standard Machine Spirit. But we'll wait to see what the rules say. I have several thoughts about ways they could mechanically make it flavorful, but whether it balances the game or not is a different question. But anyway, so the rule they discuss as the one example off the table they give is Blood Hungry. Basically, this is a slightly souped up version of the Belligerent trait on the Awakened Machine Spirit table. So basically, when you get the Belligerent trait normally, you move D6 towards the nearest enemy unit within your front arc, stopping within 1 inch. If there are no enemy units in your front arc, you turn 45 degrees instead of moving. If there's an enemy within your front arc at the end of the movement, you take a swing with a smash attack. Blood Hungry makes a lot of this movement more powerful, but also takes off the distinction about enemy models. The Corrupted Titan will move forward number of inches base equal to its base speed, not an additional d6, so it is just going to move a long way for most Titans. If it stops in front of any unit in its front arc, it will swing with d3 plus 1 for the value of its smash attack, so getting an additional attack. It's pretty awesome. It's going to move faster, it's going to hit harder, but it is going to be pretty indiscriminate, which is a bit of a downside. In most cases, it's going to be a pretty big downside. But I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what we're going to get with the other traits, though. I suspect every one of the rolls on the Awakened Entity table is going to just match the Awakened Machine Spirit table, but buffed slightly, while at the same time making it a little bit more dangerous to the player who owns the Titan. So they're probably going to be a lot more likely to hit your own stuff. But that's going to be pretty cool. So you're going to get like Titans that are going to misbehave a little more, which will be really nice if, like I say, they do something to make it more likely that the machine spirit is roused. So then we move to the Corrupted Titan personal traits. Now there's two separate parts of discussion. So let's just start by discussing the rule they've given, and I'll move over to what this rule also means in a more hypothetical. So it appears that there is a personal trait list that Princeps of Corrupted Titans can roll on. One of these options is going to be the option Tormentor, which is going to allow a Princeps who is making a targeted attack to get +1 to hit, providing he's targeting a location that has not suffered critical damage. So the rule as is really fun. I kind of like it. It's one of those little traits that's going to come up an awful lot. +1 to hit is really useful. Targeting a location that hasn't suffered critical damage happens more than you would like it to, and with this trait, it's going to be something you're going to do more and more. Weapons like Vulcan Mega Bolters are crying out for this sort of trait, as it basically means you're going to be able to be very accurate in following up with a Plasma Blast Gun blast or something that may not have quite critically damaged a Titan, but you know you're going to be able to land enough shots to get that extra +2 damage to turn it into a Strength 6 gun to really cause some damage. Yeah, I think it's really got some scope of being a pretty powerful trait if you're packing a Titan with a blast weapon and a lower strength multi-shot gun. Obviously, a Titan armed with blast weapons and melee weapons won't have much use for it, but yeah, it's kind of good fun all around. But there is the other side of the coin, the side that makes me hesitate about the appearance of this trait. What are the other traits going to be? This is always the problem with the personal trait tables. If we're looking at a table with like 6 choices, and you're playing somewhere that you have to roll on the table, or you roll on the table because you like self-monitoring yourself, like I actually do, if the other 5 options are completely different, you're not going to be able to necessarily put it on the right Titan to get the best benefit out of it. It seems, I don't know, it seems very focused on a style of warfare, and that worries me for traits. A good table of traits are abilities that don't conform with a certain style of Titan. You don't need to put this ability on. You can put a good trait can apply to any Titan to give a buff to a battle group. A specific trait that rewards a style of play or a style of Titan is going to be less useful if you're randomly assigning it. And strictly by the rules, that's how we should be using it. So that gives me some pause. But maybe corrupted traits will allow you to pick a trait. Maybe that'll be one of the benefits of being a Corrupted Titan. That will really put the cat amongst the pigeons as, yeah, and then what do we do about the other traits who aren't paying for the advantage to be able to pick a trait? Yeah, I could see that one being a really upsetting option if they weren't included and cause no ends of debate on podcasts like mine for a while. Yeah. So let's take a step back. I've got a Titan that I paid the additional 20 points to give them Warp Conduit, and I've also now got access to both this Blood Fury and, because he's my Princeps, the Tormentor role. Do I think it's worth me spending those 20 points? Absolutely. If they're the only rules I would gain access to, that one of my machine spirits were buffed, I think it's worth the 20 points. It's fun, it's flavorful, definitely worth that initial outset for the base mutation. Maybe not so much on a Warhound, 20 points on a Warhound just to give them a strength 10 shot, maybe a little too much, because I don't think you're going to get much use out of Princeps trait or Specialist Machine Spirit table. But on a Reaver, yeah, definitely. This is a good little cluster of rules. And knowing that there are going to be, 5 other options on the Awakened Machine Spirit table and a couple of other Princeps traits I may have access to, yeah, well worth the investment for a Titan in your battle group. Obviously, that utility starts coming down as other Titans appear who may not be your Princeps. You're getting less rules. But overall, it's not a bad little purchase. Very excited by it. Doesn't seem to be overly game-breaking in any of the rules they've shown. But then again, they never showed us the Vortex Missile, so who knows what else we've got coming down the pipe on that front. Which is also the segue. I'm still not 100% sure that the equivalent of the Loyalist upgrades, so the Loyalist book had Universal upgrades and Loyalist upgrades, if when we see the Traitor book, we're going to have universal upgrades and then corrupted Titans. That's still a fear I have. Very much would like the Traitor book to have universal upgrades, new universal upgrades, and then a whole pile of specialist traitorous upgrades in addition to the corrupted Titans. I think that would give traitors a great deal of flexibility, perhaps a little more than the loyalists, but it also means you could play a traitorous list without having to start signing demonic packs to get all the fun, unique flavor. But I'm not sure that's exactly what Games Workshop's going to do. The other question is going to be, how many base mutations do we get? My gut is we are going to get 5. The theory being is we are going to have 1 for each Chaos God, plus 1 for sort of unaligned demons. I would not be surprised to find out this Warp Conduit has the Tzeentchian flavor to it. It's very much in keeping with the standard Games Workshop Chaos build style that I still can't rule out of existence, even though I kind of hope perhaps not. Maybe they'll let us be a little bit more narratively driven with our Chaos Forces, keeping some of the flavor of the Demons of the Ruinstorm from the Horus Heresy book, which is just a little unknown what mechanical effect goes with which ruinous power. So that covers the basics, but the article doesn't stop there. The article also talks about the fact that in addition to the base mutation, you can buy additional mutations for your god engines, giving them additional upgrades. This could only be applied to already existing corrupted Titans, and the example they give is pretty fun. So let's just talk about that for a second. So the upgrade they give an example is Demonic Bile. Demonic Bile is a mutation that costs 15 points. Once per round, a Titan with the upgrade can spew Demonic Bile. It counts as an additional weapon and follows the normal rules for firing weapons. It has a Flamestorm range, so it's a Firestorm trait weapon. Its dice value is D3, its strength 5, and has the fusion trait in addition to the Firestorm trait. The mutation cannot be used if the Titan has taken critical damage to the head, so obviously that's where the weapon is mounted effectively. And the Demonic Bile is unaffected by any special rules from Titan Legions or Maniple rules, so basically you can't buff the weapon. So it's a really flavorful piece of upgrade, but it does concern me about its general utility. I think it may be overpriced for what it is. So let's start with my problems. First of all, Firestorm weapons. Firestorm weapons are in a urgent need of FAQing, maybe even a complete errata. A lot of the Firestorm weapons in Titanicus are awfully short range. They're also generally fairly low strength or medium strength at best. So they're really not that great at being used as a anti-knight weapon. They aren't that great at damaging undamaged Titans. Their attacks can't be targeted, so they aren't great at finishing off damaged Titans unless the damage has been equally spread all over the enemy Titan. And because the range is so short, they aren't generally that great at stripping shields, because generally when you're that close to the enemy Titan, shields are either already down or you're looking at doing other stuff anyway. And this upgrade sort of falls into that exactly. Its strength is 5, which is not something you want to be randomly targeting a undamaged, unshielded Titan with, which is what you do if you're in close combat. You can't target it, so you couldn't follow up a good close combat attack and hope. Well, you probably are going to have to sort of just vaguely hope you roll the wrong location. But its dice value are awfully low as well. I mean, D3. You roll at 1, you're just going to hit the enemy Titan in that Flamestorm template with just 1 hit. Sure, you're going to be able to hit several Titans and dish out several strength 5 hits randomly, which is okay, but probably not worth 15 points. If you get lucky, one Titan's going to get hit with the 3 hits. The other 2 both get 1 hit. Again, not great. So what about that fusion trait? Well, sure, if you're hit by it and it goes to your armor, you're always going to be at short range, because Firestorm templates always are short range. So you are going to get D10 penetration. So that strength 5 is a little better, but fusion itself is a very swingy trait. You have a 50-50 shot of being better than a D6, maybe. I don't know. I think your chance of rolling a 1 on a D10 is the same as rolling the 10s. Your chance of being rolling a 6 penetration is the same as the 15. Yeah. There's going to be a time when a demonic bile attack is going to land 3 strength 15 hits to a location, utterly wreck an enemy Titan. But most of the time, you're going to be looking at landing, strength 10 hits, which isn't terrible, but yeah, you're going to dent some armor and cause some minor damage. It's nothing to really write home about, and probably not worth the additional 15 points most of the time. Especially as it doesn't get buffed by any additional ability. But then again, if you allow the upgrade to be buffed, it does open a whole world of customization that the game designers probably can't account for. Yeah, it's an odd one. I think it's overpriced for what it is, but that's because I think all Firestorm weapons are overpriced for what they are. If you were to drop this to a 5-point upgrade, it would be fantastic and probably about as good as the Warp Conduit, as mentioned above. Yeah, it's a fun upgrade and definitely thematically hilarious, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other upgrade options you get. If they are all like this, as in they all look like additional weapons that have similar profiles, I think there could be some really good options out there. You take away the problems with Firestorm, or you change how Firestorm works, and this trait becomes really good. If this was just like, yeah, I think there's some space here for some really fun upgrades. And it does actually excite me. It is not all doom and gloom, even if I am very critical of this particular upgrade. But I do want to take a moment to talk about the price of these Titans. Taking Demonic Bile and Warp Conduit is a 35-point upgrade, which on a Reaver Titan is 10% of the cost of the Titan you're generally going to be putting out there. Yeah, they're going to be expensive, and if you aren't careful, I fear a lot of Traitor players are going to be playing with less Titans than they need to. It's going to be very easy to drop a Titan from your battle group to spread around some fun corrupted upgrades, which probably will do more harm than good in the long term. The old Orc adage, more boys, less toys, comes to mind. I don't think either of these upgrades are worth dropping a Titan over, yet I fear that's what some people are going to start doing. So I'm very excited to see what the rest of the prices look like when we finally see the Traitor book, which I fear should be coming soon. Let's talk about that for a sec. So I'm expecting near the end of this month to see both the new Warmaster kit and the Traitor book dropped. I suspect the second to last weekend of October is the one Games Workshop have marked out as their delivery window, the point they want to target. But we will see. There's been a lot of changes to their release schedule recently, and we know they're running behind on a lot of products. So maybe we could see it being pushed off to early November. We're starting to enter the holiday period, and where they usually slow down on releases as we get close to Christmas. But there's a lot of stuff they said is coming that we still haven't seen, so who knows how it's all going to work. We know those supply chains are being strained to the limit by current events. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I would Google soybeans and cargo containers and just read some really interesting journalism on the current problems with shipping. Anyway, as far as Titanicus goes, I suspect this is going to be the last release of the year for us. Looking into next year, I'm really hopeful that we're going to get another campaign book. It's been a while since we've seen a campaign book. This year has only been the Loyalist book and the Traitor book, effectively. I'm kind of jonesing for a new campaign system. Perhaps something they can go back and repair the broken systems they've been putting out, something new and one that will actually work for the games that we all want to play. I think there's been enough time with enough feedback for them to be able to put something together now. So we'll see what happens. There's always the fear that they've done these 2 big compilation books, we're going to see a new system next year. It kind of wouldn't surprise me if we did see a Titanicus 2.0 on its way soon. The system kind of feels like it's getting to that point. But with the Horus Heresy release being hinted at, or at least leaked about, I have a feeling the Specialist Games Department is going to be focused on that next year. We're awfully close to November now, so I'm really would be surprised if we saw the new Horus Heresy game out this year. Back when I was putting together the plan for this 3rd season of the Gun Engine cast that I'd planned to wrap up in the summer, but things have dragged on horribly, thanks to my life. I was going to close out with an episode titled, Is Heresy Dead? Well, since I wrote those words on my sort of vague outline of the plan, I'm pretty sure to say that Heresy isn't dead. Games Workshop have big plans for it, and I suspect next year will be the year of the Horus Heresy, with them trying to finish off the Horus Heresy book series, with the last 2 books in the Siege of Terror, and probably with a re-release of the Horus Heresy miniature game, and maybe they'll squeeze in Titanicus as the alternate kill team for the Horus Heresy. I have a hypothesis that Games Workshop's current release schedule is they're going to have a main box game every 5 years, so Warhammer 40,000 every 5 years will get a new edition, same with Age of Sigmar, same with Lord of the Rings, and then you get Horus Heresy, and then Warhammer Old World gives you the 5 big games, and they also then have a specialist game that supports it, and then the other specialist games. And I fear Titanicus, or suspect Titanicus may end up being like the kill team of the Horus Heresy release schedule. But we'll see. It's pure speculation, and I'm just trying to imagine myself sitting in a corporate boardroom at Games Workshop. And while those ideas may have been knocked around, there's no, nothing saying that that's going to be the plan they go forward with, or even if it is the plan they're going forward with today, that it's not going to be the plan that's replaced tomorrow as well. Things change fast in corporations, usually quicker than the release schedule is anyway, so we just end up sifting for tea leaves and trying to sound smart, which isn't really one of my best skills, so I'm just going to leave it here and move on. And we'll bring this episode to a close. Next episode will focus on the Iron Halo review. I decided to split these 2 episodes in half, mostly as the amount of content Games Workshop had released had resulted in me talking for quite a bit of time, which is kind of fun. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode, and next time I will return to discuss the Iron Halo. So until then, I wish you all well and good fortune.